Welcome to the Blue Raider Podcast, where we bring you all the latest news, updates, and interviews from the Blue Raiders world of sports. Along with game recaps and analysis, we bring you interviews with coaches, players, and other media members of the MTSU athletic community. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any of your favorite streaming services so you don't miss our next Tuesday morning upload. Lastly, we want to hear from you, our listeners, on our Twitter account at Blue Raider Pod, or write your submissions to the podcast email at blueraiderpod@gmail.com. Welcome into the Blue Raider Podcast. I'm your host, Jake Bolden, and today is Tuesday, January 30th. And today's edition of the Blue Raider Podcast includes our friends over at Topper Talk as a part of our 100 Miles of Hate Week. And our guest from Topper Talk is Stephen Moffett. Stephen, how's it going?
Man, things are good. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
You say things are good, and I certainly say things are good as an MTSU basketball fan. We've been on a very low wave lately, and now we're winning 2 straight games in a row, and we're heading into, arguably our biggest game of the year thus far. And I made the comment to a bunch of my friends that I wasn't necessarily the happiest guy that we had won 2 games in a row, because now I have to come on this episode and pretend that things are hunky-dory and things are going great for us. But I'm certainly excited for the matchup, as I'm sure you are as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, anytime these teams play, throw the records away, it's going to be a dogfight. So I'm expecting good games.
Yeah, I think it'll be certainly a good matchup, and we'll kind of go ahead and just rock and roll into this here. One thing about the men's matchup that is intriguing to me, not only is, MTSU seems to be playing their best basketball, but I'm more interested to know about the head coaching matchup. Considering this is Lutz's first year, we're halfway through his first season there. What is kind of what are you gathering from him in his first season?
Well, he's been a breath of fresh air. We've had Rick Stansbury over the last 6 years. Great recruiter, good coach, would bring in a lot of high level talent. Year in and year out, we were predicted to finish top of the league in the standings in the preseason. Now, how that would shake out at the end of the year, usually it didn't happen. A few times we got to the championship game of the conference tournament and just came up just short. He had too long a spell of not getting us to the tournament. We decided to make a change and brought in Coach Lutz, who's a younger guy, has some good experience with some other head coaches that he's worked for, had some success at A&M Corpus Christi, and he's definitely just brought a new energy, especially on the defensive side of the ball, just a focus and an intensity there that we haven't seen probably in, nearly 20 plus years since I first came to Bowling Green and became a WKU basketball fan. So it's been nice to see just that energy and that focus on that side of the ball. And then that kind of naturally leads into his fast break style of offense that he likes to play, very fast pace, and, try to score the ball quickly, before a defense can set themselves up. So it's been a nice first half of the season so far, some ups, some downs, but I guess the expectations are a little low when you have a staff turnover, a lot of roster turnover. So anything good that you get out of it, I think, is kind of icing on the cake, and surely looking forward to him building on his career here at Western.
Yeah, you touch on that transition that he likes to break out into. And for those Blue Raider fans that are listening, we're used to a very slow-paced offense, and we're going to see, a very fast offense. Actually, according to Ken Pom, one of the fastest teams in America, not just Conference USA, but in America. And on top of that, they shoot the ball at a 50% clip since Conference USA season has begun. So it's definitely going to be a different look, and that's where I'm interested to see where you have this slow-paced team versus a very fast-paced team. And again, we're definitely on both ends of those spectrums. And you have guys like, for you have McHenry, who's able to pour in points. But one thing that stood out to me in your most recent contest, Deontay Allen, he scores 30 points in the FIU matchup and hits 5 of 7 from 3. So again, not your typical producer of points, but it sounds like Western plays a fast enough pace. They share the ball enough that it could be anyone on any given night.
Yeah, we were dealing with an injury the last couple games. Christian Lander had been a starting guard for us. Has been out. He was in concussion protocol. They just announced today that he should be good to go for this Thursday's game. We hope that happens. He's a valuable piece on both sides of the ball, defensively and offensively. But yeah, like you said, this last game, Dante putting up 30 points. He was strong for us last year. He came off the bench and ended up becoming a starter after Luke Frampton got injured, and was really kind of a shot of energy at the end of last season. This year, he's taken a different role. He has started coming off the bench. He was kind of assumed to be a starter. He had transferred to us a couple years ago from UK. But in his role and in this offense, he's a shooter. He's not really a create your own shot type of guy. But with this fast paced offense, it causes some confusion, some collapsing from the defense. And if he gets open from three and he gets hot, yeah, he can knock down some shots in a hurry and fill up the stat sheet.
And on top of that, you mentioned him being a transfer. You got a Purdue transfer and Brandon Newman, and he seems to be quite the addition for you guys. That is an 11 points per game, 6 rebounds per game, but I don't think that necessarily speaks to his game. I mean, he's definitely a contributor on nights where McHenry's not scoring the ball. He's definitely going to be the one that's going to take a lot of the shots, but Newman is a much higher percentage shooter, one of your best defensive rebounders. He has a 20% defensive rebounding rate. So again, as a guard, not necessarily your scorer, but he's a guy that's able to get rebounds from that three position.
Yeah, he has really impressed me from day one with his all-around game. He's not flashy on the offensive end, and he kind of started out the year a little slow scoring-wise and shooting percentage-wise. But as the season's gone on, he's really ticked up the last few games and has poured in some more points for us. He's been our leading rebounder this season, kind of that wing, that guard position, but he's a big guard. He's a smooth player. He was familiar with Lutz from his time as an assistant coach at Purdue, decided to come over, and he's a senior leader, and he's really been valuable to this team. Even if he's not our leading scorer, he's a solid defender, and he gets a lot of rebounds. He's going to get you 6, 7, 8 rebounds on any given night.
Now, I'm interested to hear you play devil's advocate for Western here. In your eyes, where does MTSU have their best opportunity to win the game on Saturday in Bowling Green?
Well, I think, one of our Achilles heel this year has been, as intense as we are on the defensive end, that sometimes we're too aggressive and we start fouling a lot. And an aggressive team that tries to get to the hole a lot and can draw fouls on us is going to get to the free throw line a lot. We've seen games that we've lost. There's been huge disparities where we've only gotten 8 to 12 free throw attempts. And the other team had 25 plus free throw attempts. So when we play good defense, communicate with each other, and guard without fouling through the entire shot clock, that almost immediately turns into good transition offense on the other end. But when we start fouling, obviously it leads to players going to the bench in foul trouble. It leads to teams getting in the bonus early. And then just those free points at the free throw line with the clock not moving, that can be hard to overcome in a ball game. So that's really my biggest concern. Then my second concern would be turnovers. We play really fast, and sometimes we don't value the ball. Take away 18, 19 turnovers a game that we have, and we're still putting up 79, 80 points a game. If you could cut those turnovers down 25%, 30%, with as efficient as we are on offense when we're not turning the ball over, like this could be a deadly team, but we have to value the ball more. So I would definitely say defending without fouling and then valuing the ball and not turning it over.
Yeah, I think you just described MTSU season in a nutshell. One of the highest turnover percentages in non-steals. So we're a team that, by all means, doesn't value the basketball. And as we've already touched on, the pace in which WKU plays in certainly could put us in bad situations where we get out in transition, have to defend. And we're not necessarily, I would say, the best transition D. We're very athletic, but that definitely causes some issues for us. For us, on the Blue Raider side, the only thing that is promising right now is the fact that we have seen a downturn in those turnovers. We are seeing the scoring uptick from guys like Justin, who was just named Conference USA Player of the Week, scoring 30 points on Wednesday against Jacksonville State and then 20 against FIU. Elias King seems to be in the upswing of his scoring, as we've seen throughout the year. He's an up-and-down shooter, but as of late, he's at 10-plus in 5 straight games, and he scored 23 at both Jacksonville State and FIU. So those are promising sights for MTSU. The one thing that's interesting about this, when you look at WKU in past years, you've had large presence at center. We only carry on our bench 2 centers given to injuries earlier this year to Josh Ogundele. So that's another aspect of the game that I'm interested to hear your input on, Stephen. Like we're not seeing the typical down-low battles that we're accustomed to in this rivalry.
Yeah, we do have a couple big bodies, but they're just not called upon like we've seen, over the last few years with Jamar, and Charles Bassey. We've had some imposing guys down low that could score, that could block a lot of shots. We brought in Rodney Howard from Georgia Tech, who he's good, but he's never been the focal point of an offense. And there are times we'll dump it down to him quite a bit and let him make a play, and you can kind of see him start to get more comfortable in that role. But he's like an option, 3 or 4 in the offense. And then we also have Babacar Faye, who, again, another transfer. He's been incredibly efficient, really good back to the basket game, has good post moves, good feet. Again, they're not leaned on a ton, but we can dump it down there into them, maybe try to get the defense to collapse and then kick it out to one of our guys to shoot or drive to the basket. So, again, like you said, not our typical, roster makeup that we've seen over the last 4 to 5 years, but definitely still a couple of big bodies that can bang and make plays at times.
Well, before we roll over to women's talk, what are kind of some predictions for you? You got this matchup on the men's side. You got the matchup in Bowling Green this Saturday. And then later at the end of the month, we see you make the trip back down to Murfreesboro on a late Saturday. So interested to hear, I would assume, much like myself, that it's going to be more Western on Bowling Green on Saturday. That seems to be a place where they're a lot more comfortable. Obviously, Nick McDevitt struggles on the road, let alone in a rivalry situation there in Bowling Green, and with arguably his least talented personnel we've seen in a couple years. But then in Murfreesboro, do you see any opportunity where have you seen any flaws in Western's game on the road?
Yeah, we've been really inconsistent on the road. At home we're undefeated still this season, so I do have a good feeling about any home contest for the rest of the season. We play better, we play more relaxed, more loose. Just a better flow to the offense, more locked down on defense. When we get on the road, we tend to we fall behind. We're not communicating as well, even in empty gyms. It's not like crowd noise is playing a factor. It's just us not playing our game. And I know when we come to Murfreesboro, it's going to be a good environment. It's always a fun trip. I come every year for basketball and every other year in football. It's always a fun trip to make for me. But I am concerned about just the inconsistency on the road. And a lot of that's just being able to finish out games. We've had several games over the last few weeks that we've had some that we've won by a bucket or two. Then we've had several that we've lost and had opportunities to win down the line. But we just couldn't get it done in the last 4 minutes. We put ourselves in position and just didn't execute for whatever reason that may be. And it just always seems to be on the road when we're allowing that to happen. So I do have my concerns when we make that return trip to Murfreesboro.
Well, you certainly have the opportunity to attend both games for Raider fans, Hilltopper fans alike, with the ladies starting on this coming Saturday the 3rd here in Murfreesboro. That game is at 2 p.m. And then that evening, when that game's over, you can pack your things up, grab a quick meal, head up to Bowling Green and see the men play, where they tip off at 7 p.m. And if you're not making the trip, that is on ESPNU. We'll go ahead and touch on that first matchup that Saturday there with the ladies. We see, again, much like it has been the last decade in women's basketball, the top two teams reside in Bowling Green and Murfreesboro, and this season's not much different. Although you could make the argument FIU has made a return. I think MTSU kind of proved a lot of their flaws this last Saturday, but in my opinion, I think Western and MTSU are still tops of the conference.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I mean, MTSU has been the class of the conference for just a number of years now. I think everybody's trying to catch up and just catch up with what Coach Inzel's doing there. I mean, y'all been a dominant and top 25 caliber team and have beaten a lot of P5 teams over the last several years. Coach Collins, after he took over for Coach Hurd when she left, he's been good, but he's been inconsistent. And we've kind of seen some of that again, even this year with a little bit of a younger team. We've fallen behind a lot early in games. A lot of first halves, going into halftime down, 10 to 12 points, and then we're making these second half comebacks, which, is good to come back and win a ball game, but it'd be a lot easier to just play from ahead when you have the team that can win the ball game. We have dealt with a number of injuries. Caitlin Stewart has missed some time. She's a big freshman for us. Then Acacia Hayes, she was just cleared to return today. Actually, I think I saw it right before we logged on to record. So another good player that'll be nice to have back on the court. But then the question turns to, how much continuity and how gelled are they when we've had all these pieces that have missed various amounts of time. It's nice to have all that talent back and available, But you just worry about that consistency and can they put it together for a full 40 minutes in what's going to be a tough environment there at MTSU.
What do you think that reason for his Greg Collins' inconsistency, for that matter? He's been there for 6 seasons, and he's still that 1-2, and for the most part, it's been a 1A, 1B situation, but the only thing that makes MTSU stand out in comparison to WKU is the lack of Conference USA tournament championships. So where do you see those inconsistencies, or why Coach Collins isn't able to get that job done?
I mean, for the most part, I would say it's recruiting. I think he does a good job recruiting, especially in-state talent. He finds kids that come to Western and are good, but at some point we have to find some bigger bodies. It seems like when we lose games, we're undersized. So I definitely would like to see some more size in the ladies roster. Especially when you go to teams like Middle Tennessee and you play P5 teams. In the non-conference schedule, those size deficiencies really start to show and they just wear you out down low. I think Greg Collins is a really good coach. His teams are fun to watch. When they're making shots, man, they can get hot and, turn a 10 to 12 point deficit into a 10 to 12 point lead really quick. Especially in the third quarter, it seems like this year, they are the third quarter toppers. But just, it has to start with recruiting. It has to start with the Jimmies and Joes on the court, so to speak, on the ladies' side.
Well, you talk about the recruiting side, and one thing that's benefited MTSU is their ability to pick up out-of-country talent over there with our size that we have. And again, that's kind of the discrepancy with the squad last year, now moving into this year, where MTSU has 2 6'6" centers in Anastasia Boldareva and Yulia Grabovskaya. So that's certainly an area where I think MTSU definitely has the upper hand as far as length goes. But one thing that Western does really well this year that is stood out on paper outside of Conference USA is their ability to turn teams over. They're top 25 in the country in steals per game, so there certainly could cause some headaches. MTSU normally plays a lot more controlled pace game on the ladies' side. They run a lot more half-court sets, so we slow the ball down. And Western doesn't necessarily speed the game up from a full-court perspective, but they just have active hands. And Collins always has a good game plan, so that's always something you have to think about as far as taking care of the ball, and I think that's where Western certainly could flip the game on its head if they're able to get those early turnovers and keep the game close at half.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's not a game – going on the road in a rivalry game, it's not a game that we can afford to get down early and try to claw back, especially when you have a team that does play that slow down style of offense and just steady. And then they can dump it down to, like you said, a couple 6'6" players that can get some easy back to the basket points. It's hard to come back. Then you're relying on your 3-point shot to be falling. And a lot of times that you can live by the three, you can die by the three. And again, on the road, it's hard to win on the road anywhere. It's definitely going to be hard to win there at Murfreesboro.
Well, to get into your personnel, you already touched a little bit there on Acacia Hayes, a Murfreesboro product from Riverdale High School. Know her sisters. They both attended MTSU. They transferred in 2020 after the COVID season, moved on to Mississippi State. So there's certainly some emotion I can only imagine there with Acacia Hayes coming back into Murfreesboro. And also not only Acacia Hayes, but touch on Destiny Salary. She's been a new addition, transfer from Ole Miss. She's been kind of an all-around player for you guys, 15 points per game. She's a great rebounder. She's kind of that stretch 3-4 that you guys are looking for.
Yeah, she's been solid, and she's really picked it up over the last couple of weeks, just really scoring for us. Again, we've missed various pieces. We missed Caitlin Stewart earlier in the season. Acacia Hayes now finally coming back. So she's kind of been that consistent and steady hand, that steady scorer that we can kind of lean on to go get a bucket when we need to get a bucket.
Well, excellent stuff there. And one thing when we talk about here, the matchup as far as the history goes, that I thought was interesting, and as good as Rick Insell has been against Western Kentucky, I think this speaks again to the rivalry. When you look back in the last 10 matchups in Bowling Green, Western Kentucky leads that series at 7-3, and that dates all the way back to 2015. So that's still a rather recent number, and obviously that lasts all of Insell's career and almost all of Collins. So I think going to Bowling Green, regardless of MTSU being 6-0 and leading the conference, I don't think you can throw that out the window, as you mentioned at the top of the show. Western is a tough place to play, and the women's game is certainly no exception to that. And I would have to imagine you believe that if you had your opportunity to win, it's going to be in Bowling Green.
I guess college sports in general. It's hard to win on the road. As you see on the men's side, I think 75% of home teams are winning the ball games. I don't know what that number is on the women's side, but just you play better at home. Diddle is a great arena. We have a great collection of fans. They always show up and support the teams. And it is hard to win. I'm surprised that it's 7-3 in the last 10 in our favor, just because I know that MTSU is always such a good team. But looking at the home versus away aspect of it's surprising, but not overly surprising to me. But like you said, throw the record away, throw the favorite away, throw top 25 rankings, whatever, throw all that stuff out of the way. I mean, we have been rivals, dating back decades, spanning conferences, coaches, obviously player turnover year to year. These games are just knockout matches every year. The teams don't like each other. I do see respect when we play across various sports, but I've also seen games get chippy. Especially the football side of things, men's basketball. It's just two programs that are very close to each other. We're recruiting from the same grounds. It's going to be a fight, both on the men's and women's side. It's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, there's certainly no holds barred in this rivalry. I'm fortunate Steven's a nice enough guy to come on here and be respectful enough to carry on conversation about his Hilltoppers and the Blue Raiders, and I think it'll be tough matchups for both squads on both sides of the basketball. Steven, last minute predictions for this upcoming weekend?
I'm gonna say that the home team is gonna win both games. I think the men are gonna hold it down and keep that perfect streak, what I call the diddle magic. We're gonna keep that alive and well. We've had really good fan support. We had good student support. Now that they're back in session for this last game, Coach Lutz just put a promotion out where he's buying students a drink and a hot dog for this Thursday's game. Not sure if we'll do something for Saturday, but I'd like to think that we're going to have good support for the men. And then on the women's side, again, as much as I want to win this ball game, I want to win every ball game that Western's playing in. I do understand and respect that the opponent that we're going to be facing in MTSU is a really good, really formidable opponent. And it's just tough to go down there and get a win. But I can't wait for it. It should be fun to watch.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that's a solid analysis there, given MTSU's woes on the road and Western being so good in their own home arena. I don't think the men necessarily have as much of a chance as we may believe. I like to be an optimist, again, coming off of 2 wins, but I think it's certainly going to be a tough matchup for the men and likewise for the ladies there. I think we're just too strong at home. Top 25 in the country in attendance, and that always seems to carry over is why we're so successful at home, is given those home crowds. So I think you're spot on. The home teams will win, and I would even go as far to say that could potentially happen later at the end of February as well. So, Stephen, I appreciate you coming on. I've already plugged the show, Topper Talk, over on X, formerly known as Twitter. Where else can they find you? And I know you got a co-host as well.
Yeah, myself and my co-host Tyler Bailey, we're on Twitter, X, like you said. We're at Topper_Talk. We're also on Instagram. We're on Facebook. We're on TikTok, same handle, Topper_Talk. And then we're on YouTube as well, Topper Talk Podcast. Feel free if you want to get a glimpse into our side of things and looking into these games. We'll be posting our show within the next couple of days, previewing the games. But yeah, I appreciate you having me on. I really appreciate and respect everything that you're doing with this podcast. You've done a great job. I've tried to catch up and listen since day one, and keep up the good work, man. Appreciate you having me on.
And before I let you go, I would be remiss if we don't talk about your Niners. So you're moving on to the Super Bowl in 2 weeks.
Look, I had so many people today that come up to me. It's like, man, I know you were nervous last night. I said, I watched the game with my wife. We got down early. She said, man, this could get ugly. I said, hey, don't worry. We didn't fall asleep. We're going to put it together. We're going to stop trying to jam a square peg into a round hole. We were trying to run too much when they were loading the box. Eventually, we got into that short passing game, started moving the ball, scoring some points. And maybe Dan Campbell made some young coach mistakes and, not taking the points when you had a chance to get the points. But, they felt like they had nothing to lose, gambled and went for it. And we got the W and we go on to the Super Bowl. I'm excited for it.
Well, as a Titans fan who has Chiefs fatigue, I am certainly rooting for the Niners. I think the storyline of the Lions is a great story, but I'm ready for McCaffrey to finally get a ring for himself. And like I said, as much as I think Mahomes is a great ball player, I'm kind of tired of seeing the same team up there on the podium. So, but I appreciate it once again, Stephen, for coming on, and we'll certainly have collabs in the future moving on into football season, as well as an exciting collaboration across the country that we're having with college football that we're going to announce later in April.
Yeah, absolutely, Jake. Appreciate you for having me, and go Tops.
I appreciate Stephen Moffett from Topper Talk stopping by to discuss this weekend's matchup with Western Kentucky. Before we say goodbye, we'll roll into the Raider wrap-up portion of the episode, starting with men's basketball and their winning streak. On Wednesday, they defeated Jacksonville State 75-67. It was Justin Porter that set a new career high of 30 points. And then on Saturday, the men picked up their second consecutive win over Florida International, beating the Panthers 79-61. Elias King goes for 23 points in both matchups and scores 5 3-pointers, as well as Justin Porter scoring 20 more points, which is enough for him to earn Conference USA Player of the Week honors. The Lady Raiders also had another winning week and pushing their winning streak up to 6 games. They defeated Jacksonville State on Wednesday by a score of 67-45. And then on Saturday, they defeated, then tied for first place, Florida International 92-62. Quite the performance for the Lady Raiders. We knew Jacksonville State would be an easy matchup for them. We see Jalen Gregory drop 8 3-pointers on her way to 24 points. And then on Saturday at FIU, the Lady Raiders, with one of their more efficient offensive games of the season, scoring 92 points on the second-place team in Conference USA. Jalen Gregory also helps with the Blue Raiders' sweep of Conference USA weekly awards as she picks up the honor and due in part to her 12 3-pointers this past week. The Raiders are back in action this Saturday against Western Kentucky on the 3rd. Again, the Lady Raiders are in Murfreesboro. That tip-off is at 2 p.m. and can be viewed on ESPN+. And afterwards, join us as we make the trip up to Bowling Green. That tip-off is at 7 p.m. and is viewable on ESPNU. On men's tennis, they go 1 of 2 on the weekend. They defeat California Berkeley on Friday with a 4-3 victory, picking up the doubles point, and then Leo Ray Queen, Demise Taramonlis, and Jakob Kroslak pick up the singles points to get the Raiders a 4-3 victory. They drop to host school Duke on Sunday by a score of 4-0. They're back in action in Murfreesboro this Friday as they take on Mississippi State at the Adams Tennis Complex at 5 p.m. And just a reminder to the fans listening that is a part of Jimmy Bourne Dame's free Friday clinics for the youth that is starting an hour before start time there at the Adams Tennis Complex. Then on Sunday, the 4th, the Raiders will travel to East Lansing, Michigan, and take on the Michigan State Spartans. On the ladies' side, they also go 1 of 2 on the weekend in Louisville, Kentucky. On Friday, they dropped a heartbreaker to Bellarmine by a score of 3-4. After picking up the doubles point, they lose 2 of 4 in the singles. Then on Sunday, they bounce back with a win over Power 5 Louisville. That is the first Power 5 win for the Lady Raiders since 2016. They pick up their doubles point and remain perfect on the years in doubles, by the way. But it was Garicani, Payer, and Sposetti each picking up the singles point that pushed the Raiders over the edge for the 4-3 win. In track and field, they were in Louisville, Kentucky this weekend also. It was Ahin Kolam that picked up a personal best in the long jump with a mark of 7.09 meters as he took first place. It was also John Sherman who took first place in the 200 meters with a time of 21.61 seconds. That is his personal best. Brady Daniels placed third in the 400 meters with a 49.12. In the 800 meter, Habtamu Geta placed third with a 1 minute 51.28 second personal best time, and Wale Borali placed fourth with a 1 minute 51.34 second time. Stephen Alochi placed second in the 60-meter finals with a personal best time of 7.7 seconds. In the men's 1 mile, Geta took first at 4 minutes 7.62 seconds. Brian Kiptu took second at 4 minutes and 7.86 seconds, and Carmelo Canizaro in third place at 4 minutes 8.8 seconds. Geta also finished second in the men's 5,000 meter with a 14-minute 33.36 second time. Lakeisha Smith placed fourth in the women's long jump with a 5.65 meter mark, and Victoria Rusnikova recorded a personal best in the long jump with a mark of 5.79 meters for second place. The indoor track and field season will wrap its regular season up at the Darius Dixon Memorial Invitational on February 9th through the 10th. That's in Lynchburg, Virginia, at Liberty University, before they move on to their conference championships at the end of February. That'll do it for the Raider wrap-up in today's episode. Great stuff this week, again, from Topper Talk. I look forward to next week's conversation with head softball coach Jeff Breeden to discuss his upcoming Lady Raiders return to the Diamond after a Conference USA Championship a season ago and a regional run. Don't forget to follow the podcast on Twitter at Blue Raider Pod. Write into the episode at blueraiderpod@gmail.com. And, of course, always participate in our weekly forums over at gomiddle.com where we discuss this week's episode. I appreciate you all tuning in. And until next time, go Blue.